Welcome to the Average Punters podcast. I'm your host, Michael Chich. This is the place where we chop it up about sporting events. Today we're talking some UFC, and I'm joined by a man who likes talking UFC. As always, joins me on a Monday morning. Mig, welcome to the show.
Average Punters, how are we this Monday?
Very good. There's so much going on, man, in the UFC, and probably the most notable one is they've been talking about running back Masvidal and Diaz II. Now, just a quick recap for those who don't know. Masvidal and Diaz, they had a huge sort of money fight for the bad motherfucker belt. So they created this new belt to sort of, hype up this one particular fight that wasn't really in the title picture. And basically for 3 rounds, Masvidal probably beat the shit out of Nate Diaz, I'd say. But the fight was stopped prematurely because Diaz had like an eye injury and the doctors thought that it might escalate into something more severe. And so they ended up stopping the fight. So it was kind of anticlimactic because a lot of people thought Diaz was coming back in the end, but they're running it back now. Mig, what do you think? What did you think when you first heard this news?
When I first heard it, I messaged you about it, and I wasn't a fan. I thought it was a little bit of lazy booking on the UFC's part. I thought it was a little bit of avoidance on Masvidal's part. As the weeks progressed, and honestly, I'm such a mark, but like Dana said, the BMF title's up for grabs again, and honestly, that's what sold me. No, I'm a little bit exaggerating there, but you know, like I thought about it for a week, and I thought, all right, just get them to get that concise ending that they were after in the first place. All the people can shut up about, whether Nate would have had rounds 4 and 5 or, got the late finish and whatnot. I'm sure Masvidal was going to make an extra point to train endurance. But yeah, just the fact that I'm thinking about fight 2 has, got me, I guess, understanding that I have indeed come around, and I'm going to get excited for this because realistically, I started thinking, what other fight would you book for Masvidal? And my case was Leon Edwards. The overall case is Leon Edwards. Geez, man, I don't know. But then when I really think about Leon Edwards, it's like, I haven't seen him in a long time, fighting, or I don't even remember, who his last opponent was off the top of my head. So it's just really hard to sort of, even book that. I don't know. I just think he needs to be active rather than like talking. That's my little take there.
I think there was a little bit because I think Leon was meant to fight Woodley, or he's meant to have a fight, and then the COVID situation sort of interrupted that because
right.
he's from
That's
the UK,
right.
so he couldn't get in. So I think that sort of stuffed him up as far as everyone remembering who he is and how sort of important he could be in that particular division. But I wanted to ask, I mean, Masvidal's 36. He's obviously at the peak of his sort of popularity, and he's and probably his fighting prime as well. He's hitting some really big form in his past, around 4 fights or so. At this point, obviously he wants to cash in and make his money after his long sort of storied career. From his perspective, you're Jorge Masvidal. Is it just the smart move to go against someone like a Nate Diaz where he's confident that he can win again? It's a huge fight, a lot of eyes on it. He's going to make a lot of money versus like a Leon Edwards fight, which I think he could also sell as well, because for those who follow MMA, he had the 3-piece with the soda incident where he had an altercation with Leon backstage. And that was one of the things that really, I guess, gave Masvidal sort of more like public street cred, if you get me. Like he had it anyway, but it was like, all right, this dude's a bad motherfucker,
but
let's say.
It definitely kicked it off. Like I remember following the hype of the time when, he comes out, that savage knockout of Till. Can't remember if it happened literally the same night. I think it was where Edwards was talking in the back, 3-piece in the soda. Oh, the stocks from there, it just skyrocketed. It was just like the perfect, 3 hours. So I just remember it so vividly.
I was going to say, if Masvidal beats Diaz, do you think that warrants a title shot against either Kamaru Usman or Gilbert Burns? Or do you think that's a bit ridiculous? Because Diaz obviously isn't a top contender, even though everyone kind of wants to fight him because he's a big name and can make a lot of money. So do you think he fights the winner of Burns and Usman? Because I think they're thinking about booking that on the same card.
From what I'm hearing, I don't think that they would. Well, think about it. Masvidal and Nate, I don't think they're going to agree to be co-main on a Usman Gilbert Burns championship card, especially if they're doing the whole BMF thing again. So I think that'll be a potential issue they'll run into, which I'm sure the UFC will be pretty happy to make a main event for those guys. It was the biggest pay-per-view of last year. Sorry, I just wanted to circle back to what you said about Leon Edwards and the Tyron Woodley thing. Yeah, I definitely totally forgot about that. And just in the way of the performances and sort of the trajectory, the way the last year's gone for Tyron Woodley and things like that, you get a sense Leon Edwards probably would have got that win over Tyron, and he would have been sort of the Gilbert Burns. So yeah, I did totally forget about that in my assessment of Leon. But in answer to your question, I don't think it warrants a title shot if George can beat Nate again, which I think he will. Maybe the idea is just to keep the stocks hot. Maybe.
I think so.
Because like, as you said, there's a good chance he'll win. Showed us that last time. And yeah, it's just a way to keep it. Like you said, he's 36, in his prime physically, stock-wise. So yeah, just to sort of maintain that with the biggest fights he can in this time.
Another bloke that seems to pop up in when there's talks about the UFC or WWE or pretty much any sort of major combat-related championships is Brock Lesnar. Now, I tell you what, anytime this man is a free agent, there's anything to do with contracts, it's posted by every news site, and for good reason, because it's the beast incarnate. And obviously people are asking questions. There's a bit of talk about Brock fighting Jones. Then there's talk about him fighting DC. He obviously made a sort of cameo appearance where they tried to pump up the fight with DC after one of the UFC main events. And that I remember just being so excited when I saw that, because it's just like all these kind of childhood like WWE promo moments mixed with like the intensity of the UFC, as I always say. But Brock's a free agent, and there's a bit of talk about him potentially fighting Jones. Jones tweeted out, "Brock, I'll beat your ass too." And there's talk about him potentially going to Bellator. I guess if they could afford him, could fight Fedor, one of the greatest heavyweights in MMA. What do you think? I mean, obviously we'd all want to see Brock. Do you think there's any chance we see him in mixed martial arts, or do you think he's done and dusted?
Just having a complete guess, like, I don't know, but I feel like AEW honestly has the potential to throw the most amount of money at him. All Elite Wrestling, which is another professional wrestling league. So that's just my gut instinct. I feel like he would do something like that, but all these MMA prospect fights are so exciting.
So much more so
every
WWE.
And I wasn't following as much, like sort of back when Brock Lesnar was coming into the pipelines and was supposed to come in and fight DC after he beat Stipe, in the first fight. But from my understanding, sort of journos are saying like, I'm not buying the Brock Lesnar hype, like it never happens, et cetera, et cetera. And I think once or, the couple times he did fight, there was just like big speculation, boom, it led to the fight. So, everyone got excited, but just for so long, it hasn't actually led to a fight, where I'm getting the sense that no one is taking it super seriously just yet, just because no one has actually come forth and said anything. In my opinion, because, if anyone follows WWE, they'll know that, Paul Heyman's doing the Roman Reigns sort of act now. So I would assume that means Brock's like sort of off WWE. So I would assume at the very least, he's not re-signing the WWE. That's a vague assumption, but that's just sort of the conclusion I drew. So yeah, it's interesting to see Brock wherever he goes, because it's a fresh start, if it is. Because the WWE...
If he did, who would you want to see him fight if he fought in mixed martial arts?
If he fought in mixed martial arts, the fan in me would prefer John Jones. That would be awesome. Just Brock versus John Jones, or just Brock versus an established name, basically. Like even an Overeem, maybe. Oh no, they've already fought. I forgot about that.
Overeem.
Yeah, John Jones.
Cool. Well, I guess since we're talking heavyweights, Stipe actually tweeted out during the week that he's not actually interested in fighting Francis. We've spoken a bit about this podcast that Francis is the obvious next in line. I kind of get it from the standpoint that Stipe's already beat him. It wasn't a close fight. Francis hasn't really showed anything different as far as his skill set. You know, to really warrant another title shot, which is kind of hard because he's sort of almost cleared out that whole division. So what more does he have to do? You know, like, should he just drag out a match just to show that he can actually wrestle or something like that? It's kind of hard to understand like what he would have to do. But I kind of, for me, from Stipe's position, it's sort of very high risk and low reward. I don't think he's going to make any ridiculous amount of money or really boost his stock or his legacy at all just by beating Francis again, given what he did to him in the first fight. It's not like it was a coin flip or anything like that. So it seems like he's not interested in fighting Francis, but I don't know like where that would leave the division. It seems like it would be on hold. And I think Stipe would probably, in that case, just want to hold out for like a John Jones fight or like a Brock Lesnar or just someone that entices him, I guess. But it was, so when you heard that information, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Stipe's not interested.
Yeah, look, I'm not exactly sure what to make of it. Initially, I was pretty excited when Stipe blatantly said after the DC win that, you know, Francis is next. I just think from a meritocracy standpoint, from a who's next in line standpoint, I think if you're weighing up the pros and cons of like, you know, people starting to make big money in fights, some cons are, you know, that much leadway that Stipe has where he can just disregard who's rightfully next, basically. So, you know, that's just from a certain standpoint, but I totally understand, you know, the high risk, low reward. He's already beaten Francis. It's not like he's, you know, completely ducking him or anything like that. So, you know, it is a hard one. There's a case on both ends because Francis has just been winning fights. So like, you know, anyone else in that position would be granted their title shot. So yeah, it's a really hard one. Yeah, I just think that sometimes somebody has cleared the pack so, you know, far that they should do that before the super fight, in my opinion, you know, just for some, what would you call it? For some solidarity, you know?
That's a fair point. And
yeah.
Okay, so I guess our man Khamzat Chimaev, we've sort of been waiting, wondering what are they going to do with him next after his impressive debut and then follow up just mauling of two opponents on Fight Island. Seems like the UFC is going back to Fight Island from what Dana's been saying. And so now initially I heard they were trying to do Chimaev versus Damian Maia. And it seems like they ideally would want to do that on Fight Island. But in between that, he's going to fight a guy named Gerald Meerschaert. I hope I'm saying that right. But this dude...
it's Meerschaert.
Meerschaert. Sorry, thank you for that. Yeah. So this dude's a big step up in competition. This guy's 31 wins and 13 losses. So, I mean, you know, I don't know much about this dude, but he's obviously a much more, you know, successful fighter in the UFC. He's been around the block. So it's going to be a big test for Chimaev. And we don't really know sort of how far his skill set goes at this point because he hasn't had any competitive matches in the UFC. So he's got to fight him on Fight Island. Apparently, assuming he could get past him, then he'd want to turn around and fight Damian Maia. But when I heard Maia, man, I was like, bro, they're throwing him right into the deep end with a Damian Maia. Like, that's a dude who was just contending for the title not too long ago. So
Yep.
I was surprised when I first heard that. Like, I mean, what do you think?
I'm pretty sure I remember he asked for Damian Maia at a certain point. So, you know, after one of the wins, after his second win, maybe.
Yes, that makes sense.
So, you know, and I think he's called a lot of it out, and you know, Dana really likes that. From memory, you know, this may have happened in the past, but from memory, I don't recall anybody who had like sort of two fights booked like that in a row, sort of like a fight and then a theoretical next fight should everything go well with the initial one. So that's really cool to see. And you know, I think that yeah, there's a lot of belief in what Khamzat can do, and I'm honestly really excited to see it. I'm excited to see him face some, you know, a step up in competition. But I think someone with that sort of level of belief I don't get any like sort of false vibes from Khamzat. So even if he does go up and maybe he doesn't make it look as clean or he's not as dominant like that, I don't think we're going to see any sort of flop or anything like that. But I'm
It
really
is
keen.
interesting because I guess if he could get past, we're jumping far ahead, but get past the Damian Maya. I mean, if you were to see Hamzat versus like a Kamaru Usman or a Gilbert Burns, like, I mean, that's very enticing because a lot of people complain that Usman doesn't work, as in he wrestles dudes, but doesn't really like get to work, like doing much ground and pound and really fighting his opponent. He just sort of smothers him and like lies on him. So that's one of the big criticisms of him in terms of being exciting from a viewer perspective. So I think if you were to throw a guy like Khamzat Chimaev, it would kind of force that out of like an Usman to really be a bit active, I guess. So yeah, I'd be really keen for that. So like part of me is in the back of my head is thinking maybe Dana's trying to fast track him a little bit just to have a real new, exciting dude in the welterweight at the top of the welterweight division. Because obviously there is that belief in him from their perspective. And he, as you just said, has that sort of self-belief as well.
Yeah, just to touch on like maybe, being fast tracked slightly, I think that when you dominate guys with the amount of, strikes to the strike differential that he had in those fights and, control differential, I think you have to push the fast track a little bit. Like, I think it'll be like silly to keep him in the same league after he's done that twice in a week or, in 10 days. So I think it's good. It's a mid-pace push. It's not like they've thrown him straight to Maya. I like the Meerschaert fight first, and then see how he progresses from there. But I like everything. I like it all.
Yesterday, there was a UFC card. Main event was Alistair Overeem versus Sakai. So just quickly to recap that, they had a 5-round fight, real exciting fight, a bit of back and forth. I believe Sakai seemed to get on top in the first 2 rounds, was really using his Muay Thai, was hitting Overeem up against the cage, throwing some like vicious elbows and that sort of thing. Then sort of round 3, round 4, Overeem really started to turn the tide. It seemed like his experience played into it a little bit as well. Managed to take Sakai down and get some vicious ground and pound in on him. And then ended up finishing Sakai in sort of continuing along that sort of game plan and took him down at the start of the 5th, and the ref stopped the fight after some like real hard shots on the ground. So I guess what'd you make of that fight overall?
Main takeaway probably is, as you said, Overeem's so seasoned, man. Like, there's a lot of fighters that I worry about when they back up against the fence and they've got their head guard up like that, and they're taking a lot of swings from a proficient striker. Overeem, man, he just wasn't letting him through. There was one sort of elbow that caught through the middle and sliced his head up a little bit, but and he was getting pieced up a fair bit in the first couple of rounds, but his defense is like so there. So no shots could like really get through, too clean. Initially when I was watching the fight, I thought like, this is awesome. Like Overeem, he sort of came back, got it done. That ground and pound was cool. And then I was thinking like, but throw him in there with a Francis. And I think he just, I don't know, just goes the same way, blah, blah, blah. My mind always goes to the future. But then the pie is in the ground and pound. It's like, if he's a kickboxer who's implementing his last 2 victories with that sort of ground and pound. So I'm pretty sure he won his last fight like that. That's what the commentator said anyway. So man, if Overeem, and then I love what he's saying at his age. He said he's still learning. So he looks really good, man, and really deserved the win. And yeah. Cool things for Overeem. I hope he makes a like real good push.
Yeah, it seems like they're potentially talking about fighting Derek Lewis next, and he was tweeting during the fight, sort of being a bit funny, like just giving every round to Sakai, even if Overeem was winning the round, obviously.
Dude, Overeem had a dominant round and he's like 10-8 Sakai.
I love that. Just the banter. But yeah, like I'm kind of with you though, like as far as like he does get hit over him, and I feel like this dude should be studied because I don't know how he bounces back. Like he's had so many fights, like 60 plus fights in MMA and like professional fights, and he's been hit so many times, like knocked out multiple times, but he still seems fine, man. Like he's coherent, he bounces back, he wins. Like it doesn't seem like it phases him, and he's 40 years old, so it's very impressive. Like the career he's had is such the brutal nature of the sport.
His head got blown to Jupiter by Ngannou. So
Yeah.
I'd be genuinely so scared if he fought. But at the same time, it's like, with anyone else, you'd expect them to be, on a decline from fighting Ngannou at, having a guess he was 38, 39 at that time. Now he's 41. You'd think theoretically he'd be worse off. But with an Overeem, I'm just not so sure that's the case. Like I have faith that he's, as you said, really good at rebounding and learning and, so got faith in him.
Mig, thanks for chopping it up on this Monday morning, Average Punters fam. This is where we chop it up and we'll be recapping the news during the week. And there's a lot of big cards coming up. Adesanya Costa's not too far away. Woodley and Covington not too far away. So plenty coming up in the subsequent weeks here on Average Punters. So Mig, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.